Welcome to the Kaur Show. I'm Ranjeet Kaur from the UK, and here with me is my co-host Gurinder Kaur from Melbourne. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh Penji.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh Penji. Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much.
That's great.
So today's topic is about mindful parenting. And personally, being a parent myself, I find this to be one of the most hardest and most challenging roles in my life. But it would be great to find effective strategies to be a better parent. There's always room for improvement. And many parents suffer in silence with dealing with children's tantrums and behavior. So where do we seek help and guidance when trying to be a better parent? So that's what this topic is about today. And Benji, what's your understanding on this subject?
I think this is a really interesting topic, and I do have a lot of interest in this, and I am looking forward to learn a lot from Penji today. I will be speaking to. And definitely, when we talk about parenting, I think there is so much on our shoulders. It's a huge kind of responsibility and seva. If we talk about in Sikhi concept, many times we might have seen when we talk to some elders and they say seva mili hai. So that does mean something. It's much more than the normal parenting we have on our shoulders. So I'm looking forward to talk about this topic and learn more.
That's great. So today we have a guest speaker called Amandeep Kaur from Seek Your Mind, and she's also the founder of Kaur Coaching. So let's welcome Benji to the show. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
Welcome to the show, Benji. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Ji.
And so if you can start with telling us about yourself and the work you do in regards with Seek Your Mind and Kaur Coaching as well, that would be great.
Anji. So as you said, my name's Amandeep Kaur. So I started Kaur Coaching as part of my own health journey. I was struggling with my own health, and I came to know about a few things like the mind-body connection. I was struggling with parenting as well, and it was about my own self-development. So I chose to leave work and kind of pursue this, and I realized a lot of things that other people didn't know, basically, and I felt like people should know this stuff. So that's when my journey started. At the same time, I was coming into Sikhi, so I was born into a Sikh family, but we didn't necessarily practice it. So I was using that at the same time. And so I came to work with Seek Your Mind as well. And that happened through a good friend of mine called Dr. Darshan Kaur. Some people might know her. And so we had started these Gurmat Vichar groups in the Gurdwara. And we were discussing a lot of topics. So just day-to-day things. It could be parenting, but it was also about our kind of health, our mental health, our emotional health, our spiritual health. And then she suggested that, we work together with Seek Your Mind as well. So Seek Your Mind is about raising awareness of mental health and well-being in general, in the Punjabi and the Sikh community. So, we've got website, you can contact us via email if you need support. And there's lots of work going on in the background in terms of not only creating awareness, but providing support as well for those who need it in our community.
Awesome. So Penji, parenting in itself is a very interesting topic. So please tell us something like what is mindful parenting? It's a very interesting term. We've heard about mindfulness. And this is something really a trending topic these days, especially in the West. So please tell us what is mindful parenting?
Yeah, I know it can be confusing because mindfulness is a term that's just bandied around and sometimes we don't always understand it. And the funny thing about the word mindful is the whole point of being mindful is that you're not using the mind. It's actually about being present. So what that means to me is I'm not in my thoughts. I'm talking to you right now. But if I'm thinking about, I've got to give the kids breakfast or I've got to do this after this is finished, what am I going to do? That's not being mindful. So the opposite of that is right now I'm talking to you. I'm not even necessarily thinking about what I'm saying. I'm just being present and I'm answering the question as it happens. So if you imagine it's like driving a car, sometimes you start driving and you've got you to your destination and you don't know how you got there because you weren't in the journey at all. That's the opposite of mindfulness. But other times you might be driving and you're looking at the scenery, you're looking at the trees. That's being present. So that's what being in the present moment is. So when it comes to parenting, it's about being present with your child and being present with yourself. So what is the situation that's in front of you right now? So what we can do, I often look at opposites to try and explain what something is. So the opposite is, for example, if my daughter, sometimes she doesn't eat a lot, but if I'm thinking in terms of fear, like, oh, everybody's saying, "Bahut Maria," you know how our community is like, "Bahut Maria." To me, that's like, oh, I'm a bad mother. I'm not feeding her. That's why she's skinny. So I'm going to put extra pressure on her to eat. But if I'm being mindful, if I'm being present, I can think about, well, actually, what's really going on here? Could it be that she's not hungry in this moment? So I had a really good example of that. There was actually that thing was happening where she wasn't eating. I was starting to get a bit stressed at her. And I stopped in the moment and asked her, oh, but why are you not eating? And she was like, oh, Baba gave me a packet of crisps and a chocolate bar. And it became really obvious that actually it wasn't that, oh, she's not eating. It wasn't about me being a good or a bad mother. It was just that she wasn't hungry. So that's how we use mindful parenting in the moment, is take each situation as it is without thinking about the past. Other things that can come into our parenting are, things that our parents did, values that they had. And us projecting those onto our children. So you've got to be really good at your schoolwork, or you've got to be really good at sport. But mindful parenting is about accepting your child exactly how they are. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's a typical question, but is mindfulness the same as meditation?
Okay, so I would say there is a difference. So meditation can come in many different forms. People can meditate for relaxation. In Sikhi, we've got Naam Simran or Naam Abhyas, which is, really connecting at a deeper level to the truest essence of ourselves. So I would say, even with like Naam Simran, I would say mindfulness is a small part of that. So for me, what mindfulness is like I said earlier, it's becoming aware of right now. It's more like, I'm not sure if this word is the correct word in Punjabi, but dhyan. So it's cultivating dhyan. It's about focusing in on what's going on right now. So it could be how you feel in your body. It could be how you feel emotionally. It's just building your awareness of what's going on inside of you and outside of you. And on the opposite side, meditation can be about those other things. So when we're doing Naam Simran, for example, you want to cultivate that focus. So there is a little bit of mindfulness involved, but it does go beyond that. So I don't know if that makes sense, or if you want me to go into that a bit further.
Yeah, now that does make sense. I think dhyan is definitely a right word, but there is another word in Punjabi that comes to my mind, and that is suchet rehna. And I'm getting that word from Mata Kiwi ji, who was really suchet, or mindful about everything around her, be it politics. But I just don't want to get into that. It was like personal life, family life, and everything. So just Penji, as you mentioned, being mindful in parenting, dhyan rakhna between you and your child, and just focusing on that. How easy is that in today's world? I mean, as we compare in the maybe olden times, what we can call it, how easy is it, given the circumstances and all the, previously in the olden times, we didn't have many ladies who were women who were working. Now, women is working, there's so many responsibilities. How easy is it?
So I would definitely say that I can only go on my personal experience. I wasn't around in those times before, but basing it on my own experience, it has been difficult. So, that is the thing of the modern world, is we want careers, we want to go out and work. And at the same time, there's so much more going on. There's so much more pressure with schooling, tuition, after school clubs. But we're doing the housework and things like that on top of that as well. So it can get really difficult. And actually, for me, mindfulness is focusing on one thing at a time. And one thing I used to pride myself on was, I'm a woman, I can multitask. And what I found is actually that's not necessarily a good thing, because you're not doing justice to all the tasks that you're doing. So what I'm finding is I can still have all of those roles. I can still work. I can still, cook and clean and look after my family. I can also ask for support from my family, which is another thing that maybe happened in the past that we've lost now, is that support from our extended family, our in-laws, our Darania, Jatania. We all would have lived together as a community, and we would have had that support. So it wasn't just the mother looking after the child, which adds a lot of pressure these days as well. So it has become difficult, but that it's also advantageous that we have things like social media, we have the internet, so we can have access to tools. And in Sikhi we have Sangat, so that's an amazing gift that Guru's given to us, that we can have the Sangat even if we don't have family around us. That Sangat can help us out. So it can be difficult, but mindfulness and just kind of being present is a practice. So we have to put the time aside and invest that time, just like we do in Sikhi. If you're going to invest in putting time aside for Namabhyas, for Nitnem, for learning Gurbani, for doing Khoj of Gurbani, that all helps towards mindfulness. But if that's not your path right now, you can still invest that time to practice, mindfulness as a meditation, to practice it in your day. So for me, it's just kind of, I see life right now, what it used to be for me, it was just really tangled up. I was trying to do too many things at once, and I was trying to be everything to everyone. And this process that I've been through is just kind of, pulling the strings and just straightening things out and being able to focus on, okay, this is my priority, what matters to me the most, and that's what I'm going to focus on, and everything else comes after that.
So do you find, Ranjeet, during the lockdown, how to create regular set time of mindfulness and gratitude? Like, what would you suggest?
So, I mean, in some ways, it's been different for different people. So we can't generalize and say we've had so much more time. So some people have had so much more time in lockdown, but for others, it's been much more intense, especially where you've got younger children, because you're with them constantly. Whereas before, maybe they were at school or nursery, or you got to go to work. So it's not that everybody has more time. But what I would say, as a coach, is what we would say when building habits is build your habits into existing habits. So you don't really create new habits, you change old habits into new habits. So just like every day, you might brush your teeth twice a day, you're going to get up and you're definitely going to, well, hopefully you're definitely going to do that. Otherwise you'll have bad breath. So what we can do is we can add any habits that we want to add onto those. So for example, for me, it's I'll get up a bit earlier when I'm going to start a new habit, and I would do it in that time in the morning. So for me, that's before the children wake up. I will add a habit in there. So that might be gratitude practice, that might be meditation, practicing mindfulness meditation, and in addition, if you're doing Nitnem and Namabhyas, you can add that in there. And it's great in Sikhi, we have these allotted times already, Rera Sahib. So it doesn't have to take a long time. So it's very much quality over quantity. Even if you spend 2 minutes thinking about what are you grateful for, or 2 minutes really connecting to your body, connecting to your surroundings, thinking, what am I thinking right now? Is it true? Or you can add it at bedtime. That's another ideal opportunity. And the thing is, when you add a routine into your bedtime, that's what you take into your dreams. That's what you take into your sleep. So if you're stressing, or if you're on social media just before you go to bed, that goes into your kind of your relaxation of the nighttime. So those are really good practices to have. But in addition to that, if you don't even feel like you can have time to sit down and do these, at those times, this is a constant practice that you can be doing in your mind. You don't have to put time aside. Like sometimes when I have a negative thought, I will just try and turn it around straight away and think about, okay, I'm feeling stressed, but what can I be grateful for in this moment? Or I'm feeling stressed, so okay, what's really going on here, and just really connecting myself in that moment.
Awesome. Yeah. We've just got a comment as well. I'll just read that. So we got a comment from Dipin. She's mentioning that with the current situation, kids are also quite anxious with not being able to do the things they usually do, or go to the school and play outside, meet friends. So Penji, in Victoria, in Australia here at the moment, we have stage 4 lockdown. So we are not allowed to, go outside much. It's only 1 hour we are getting. We are not allowed to visit friends. So
Yeah.
how, as a parent, can we make it easier for them? Any tips on that?
Yeah, sure. So when we were going through that, so ours in the UK has eased a little bit now. But one of the main things that became apparent to me is this is a perfect opportunity to, first of all, relax. So just before lockdown, so my children, they were going to school. Every evening after school, they had a club. So we were constantly running around, and all of a sudden there was nothing to do. So when we say we don't have time to spend quality time with the children, right now they're feeling anxious. We as adults are feeling anxious, and the children are picking up on that as well. So we have to invest in our own ability to deal with the situation. So whether that's meditation, whether that's, whatever your strategy is to look after yourself and your mental care, be doing that, because that will affect the children first of all. It's an amazing opportunity to spend quality time. The more time you spend, it's not about actually time, but it's about the more quality time. So if they've always wanted you to sit down and play Lego with them, do that. If you can go out in the garden, you can go for a walk, do that. Because right now they need you to feel safe. So as much as you can do that, do that. But in terms of the other thing that we found was, our routine, it did go out of the window, but that was okay. We don't need to be so strict right now, in terms of, you have to do your homework, or, you have to eat at these times. You should have some structure, I believe, because you don't want everything going out of the window, but just kind of learning to relax a little bit, knowing that these are unusual times, and that actually whatever's happening is okay. If they're feeling stressed, let's do something fun today. Let's make the most of this time. Let's talk to each other. Let's teach each other things. One thing that my children love is if I ask them to teach me something. So teach me how to play your game. And the other thing is, even though, like in the UK, we called it isolation, social isolation, it doesn't have to mean literally you have to be socially isolated. So we have technology. Let's make the most of it. So, I arranged calls, video calls with my children's friends. So, using WhatsApp or Zoom, they could talk to each other. So even though they were both playing, they weren't even talking necessarily a lot, but they were still interacting with other children through social media. So it doesn't have to be that social media is the all evil, like we make out to be. We can use this technology. At the end of the day, Vaiguru's created this technology through us. So let's use it for good. So I think my main tips would be, kind of relax into it. Throw the rules out a little bit, have a little bit of structure, but also look after yourself in order to look after the children as well, and keep those connections where you can.
That's great. Thank you so much, Benji. So with the lockdown in the UK, I found that Zoom and we had virtual maths and English lessons that really helped. It meant that the children felt a bit like there was normality there. Obviously, the evening after school clubs, they were gone out the window. Obviously, we couldn't have that same contact, but it did help, and we tried to make the most of it. Other things that we did was like gardening, life skills that you can learn that you wouldn't learn in school, for example. We did some of those as well, and that really helped, like cooking, and it was a lot of family time together, and it still is, obviously.
Yeah.
So Benji, how do parents keep calm when kids are repeatedly pushing our buttons?
That's a really, really good question, and I fail at that quite a lot as well. So I wouldn't say I'm at a stage where I'm calm all the time, but I can definitely say from where I was at some point over time, things are getting better and better. So it's quite a complicated subject, and I won't necessarily go into all the details as to why we feel that children are pushing our buttons. But, kind of to break it down really, really simply is, there's certain things that we went through as children, certain little traumas, certain things that happened to us from our parents, our teachers, and our peers, that then trigger us. So, for example, there was, I was giving the example of my daughter. Actually, I can use a different example. So like my husband is a wrestler. So they do like Olympic style wrestling. But when he was wrestling, a lot of pressure was put on him by certain people to do the wrestling, and it was, you have to do it, and he was spoken to in that kind of way as, oh, you're weak if you don't do it. So as my son has grown up, that's been passed down through my husband to my son, and it was like, oh, you have to do wrestling, oh, you're weak if you don't do it. So he's learning to change his behavior. So some of those triggers come from our parents, and that's why mindfulness is really important. That's why awareness is important. So we can be aware of what's coming from our parents that we're passing down without realizing, and becoming aware of them, and what's actually the truth of the situation. Not every boy has to do certain sport. Not every girl has to be girly. So that's kind of where the trigger's from. So in order to not be so triggered, in order to not have our buttons pushed so much, we have to start to become aware of what are those triggers and really reflect on them. So, Guru Maharaj tells us, Bande Khoj, Dil Har Roj. So every day we should reflect upon what is triggering me, what's really going on, because it's often, most of the time, 99% of the time, it's not the child that's triggering us. That trigger is happening internally. So we need to reflect on why is it triggering us. So we need to have our own practice. Again, it's not about the child. How can we calm ourselves down in that moment? And like I said, I fail at that all the time. But one reason why it doesn't bring me down anymore is because I'm really compassionate with myself. And that's something I've had to learn, that I make mistakes, and that's okay to make mistakes, because we're all learning. Most of us didn't go on a course on how to parent, right? If you were fortunate, you would have had really parents who are really tuned in, who are really conscious, really mindful. And if you had that situation, the chances are you're probably like that. But I would say the majority of us had parents who and it's not about blame. They didn't know themselves what they were passing down. They had a really hard life. They had to be at work. They had to provide basics. So some of those things have been passed down to us, and we're carrying those on as well. And that's why our buttons are being pushed. So we have to learn to be compassionate. But after the compassion, that it's okay to make mistakes, we can reflect. So even if we've got angry, we've shouted, if we reflect after that, there's less chance it's going to happen again, and we'll know what to do. So for example, I'm trying to think of an example. So I had a few interactions. My son is 11, and he's starting to come into some of those changes that you see in older children, and he wants his power now. So as he's getting older, he doesn't want to be told what to do all the time. So I was still doing that a lot with him. I was like, okay, now you need to eat. Now you need to get dressed. Now you need to do this. And he was starting to rebel against that a little bit. So even though we'd had an argument, first of all, I reflected on it. I gave him space. Then I went up to him. We talked about it. That's really important, is to open the communication. Because I'm the adult, I apologize first, and I explain myself first. And there's nothing wrong with apologizing to your child. It doesn't take away from the relationship. My job as a parent is not to be a dictator to my child. My purpose as a parent is just to guide them and actually learn from them. So I spoke to him. I listened to him as well about what he thought was going on. And then we both kind of reflected together, what can we do differently next time? So, he was getting angry. He triggered anger within me. Then I got angry as well, which was my responsibility. So we sat down and we thought about, how can we be calmer next time? So some of the things we came up with is we could breathe, take some deep breaths. One thing that he said to me was, when I get older, I want to be in the Banj Pyare. So I was like, okay, how about you take 5 deep breaths, 5 belly breaths, and you say each of the Banj Pyare's names, and that will help you calm down. And then he was like, yeah, but what about you, mummy? You need to calm down as well. So I was like, okay, I'll do the same thing. So I'll take 5 deep breaths. And if we're still, we can figure things out. If we're still, butting heads, we can talk about what other strategies can we use. So communication's really important. But most of all, doing that courage within yourself, like what is triggering you? Why is it triggering you? And reflecting on what can you do differently next time. And I just like to repeat it because it's really, really important, is, probably more than 99% of the time, it's not the child's fault. I would say probably never it's the child's fault. It's us being triggered. We might be tired. So it might be, I know I'm like a little toddler. I need a daytime nap sometimes. And when I don't get that, I'm a bit more grumpy. So I run out of energy. So I have to make sure I look after myself, and I can, give them time to do something they're doing and take some rest for myself. I,
That's absolutely right. I like that, where you got to take care of yourself in order to take care of the whole family.
Yeah.
I also like what you said about compassion, and then you have reflection, and that's via open communication. Because if that's shut down, there's no communication, there's no compassion, and you can't reflect, and then there's no gateway to resolve an issue. So the sitting down with the child, and even just later on asking them, okay, so what happened earlier? Because then they've gone tande rather than garam hoke, like they don't want to talk when they garam as well. So nor would
Yeah.
we actually if we're angry.
yeah.
Definitely, yes, yeah. So Penji, just on that, I know you mentioned about discipline as well. So we were having a parenting workshop a few weeks back, and we were talking about discipline, and our guest speaker told us that after the age of 5, especially, I know in Punjabi families there's this kind of habit, we can say, that we have actually inculcated in our family structures, that we are always running behind children, roti kha la, this kar la, oh kar la. So we're always running behind. And if we look at other families, like Western families who are raised here, so they are more in discipline. So probably they're not doing always running behind the kids and asking them to eat food and all these things. So do you think there is an instinct of a Punjabi culture that's coming in that? Do you think that's helpful, that's damaging the discipline, or what's your say on that?
I think it's really difficult because it's going to be on an individual basis. No Punjabi or Western family or anything in between is going to be exactly the same. So for me, everything has to have a balance. And there is no right or wrong. It's going to be on an individual basis. So the advantage of what I would say, what you've just described as the Punjabi way, is running after your children and looking after them. There's a lot of love and compassion in that. So I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that. There's one thing that I want to make really, really clear, which is you cannot spoil your children with attention and affection.
Yeah.
Children only get spoiled when you replace attention and affection with things. So when you buy them things and you're constantly giving them things rather than, affection and attention, then by giving them the things, then they'll get spoiled. But they will never get spoiled by you giving them affection and attention. And that, that's my deep belief. At the same time, in terms of discipline, I think, some discipline is required. So we know, coming on this path of Sikhi, we do need a earth, we need a discipline, so our mind doesn't take over. And that's why we have it. So I think it's good to have a balance of both. But the main thing for me is, Maharaj says, Jin prem kiyo tin hi prab payo. What is our purpose for having these children? What do we want to learn from these children? And for me, it's, if I cannot accept myself, or I cannot accept my children, how am I going to accept Guru's hukam? How am I going to accept that Vaheguru is in everybody if I cannot accept my child? So the thing with Western discipline is we're very much drumming them into becoming workers. And it's about status. It's about, well, if you do this amount of work, you'll get money, you'll get a car, you'll get a house, you'll get a marriage, you'll get children. But we know that there's so many people out there who have done that and they still feel empty. We can't fill that hole inside with things. So we have to balance that with not necessarily the Punjabi way, but with the Sikhi way is definitely, having that love. We've got to, the only way we can teach our children what is prem is by giving them prem, by showing them prem. And then they will understand that prem and they will be able to apply it to themselves. And they will be able to apply it when they're understanding what Guru's telling us. That, for me, everything is about love, really, at the end of the day. I know that sounds a bit out there, but that's my understanding.
No, that does make sense. So just on that, so I know there are some difficult kids and there's some easy kids, and it's a vice versa as well, like parenting as well. Everyone has their own journey as well. Now, just with parents, when we talk about, father and mother, it could be sometime, one is more a kind of a mindful parent and another one is not. So there could be a conflict with something relating to that. So it becomes more challenging, I believe, when one parent think, okay, no, that's not the right way. The other parent is following up. So having a conversation, or how do you deal, that's something you have to relation build yourself between parents as well. So any tips on that, how that conversation can be held?
Yeah, so I can definitely talk about that from personal experience. So, um,
Yeah.
I would say when we first had children, my husband and I, neither of us knew what we were doing. And maybe I had less of a clue than my husband even did. So over time, obviously, I've been looking into this. I've been doing reflection on myself, and he's been coming along too. But obviously, not everybody is the same. Not everybody's going to be at the same level. So I'm by no means criticizing him. There's a lot of things that I've learned from him in terms of acceptance and compassion that I didn't have within me. But in terms of, there's always going to be times where he's doing the right thing and I'm doing the right thing. So what's happened is, I think, as we touched upon right at the beginning, is communication is key. So being able to sit down and talk about, how we're butting heads. So the wrestling thing is a perfect example where, at times he's put a lot of pressure on our son to go into wrestling, but it's not had a good effect on him. So I've tried to sit down and explain to him, do you remember how you felt when that happened to you? And do you want him to do it because he loves doing it or because he feels like he should? And do you want him to do it and then end up resenting you for it? So, there's been a lot of communication in terms of that. And, that kind of the eating thing. And then obviously he's much for the discipline kind of thing. And, children should behave a certain way. And as you might have picked up from my way of talking, I've become much more relaxed over time and just been like, but let them do, let them be themselves, let them build their confidence. So it's very much a compromise to a certain extent, of kind of understanding, finding that balance of what works and what doesn't work. But at the same time, if you tried to talk, and you feel like it's really not working and the other person is really, firm in their beliefs and it's not what you believe, that still doesn't stop you from doing it. So there's nothing to stop you as a mother or father or even a grandparent to show that love, to be mindful in the way you approach that child, because that child is still going to benefit from having that interaction with you. And communication is so key, is just really explaining, okay, Pitaji or daddy wants you to do things this way, and this is why he's saying it. And, from a compassionate way, we can understand why he's saying that. But I also want you to look at it from this point of view. And that also helps them to develop like their buddhi in a way, like, so they can make an informed decision and decide what's right for them and what's wrong for them. So even if you are butting heads with somebody and their kind of ideology is completely opposite of yours, it doesn't mean that you have to stop doing what you're doing. You can still implement it up to a certain degree and talk about it with your children.
Yeah, now that's very informative. Just on that line, Penji, so say, for example, if you find that, okay, one parent is actually having a conversation with a child, and you find that the way that one parent is actually conversating at the moment with the child, and you find at the spot, no, that's not the right way. How we can say it's the right or wrong? Is it like to maybe contradict the same person, the parent, at the same time, or have that conversation later on? What do you think? Should we say, okay, no, dad, you're wrong, don't do it in front of the child, or should we just postpone and wait for the right time to talk?
So I would like to say you should wait, but that's not necessarily something that I do. Ideally you would wait and you're not going to have that conflict. But at the same time, you can also do it at the same time, but you can do it with love as well. So I will often interject, and because sometimes what the other person's saying is doing some damage. So if they're not speaking in a compassionate way to the child, and you can see that it's hurting the child, you do want to interject. You don't want that damage to happen and then wait till later and talk about it all the time. So I will interject, and you have to be mindful that you're doing it with love. So I can say, I'm not sure I agree with what you're saying. I don't always say it in that way, like it's easy to say it right now. But, I was saying that I don't think that's right. I think we should do things this way. What do you think? So it's tricky. Obviously, you want to demonstrate respect, mutual respect and mutual love in whichever way you do it. So if you feel like the other person is going to get angry with you and it's going to become an aggressive situation, then obviously wait till afterwards, when things have calmed down, and bring it up in that way. But if you have a good enough communication and a good enough relationship that you can bring it up at the time and you can bring it up with love and respect, then you can do it then. And then you avoid the damage being done, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, that's very useful. And we had one question on that, Penji, from Aman Kaur, and she's asking, what do you think in terms of parents having different opinions? We touched on that bit as well for raising a child, and how does it affect on child's mind and behavior? I think that's a very important question.
Yeah. So, anything that we do as a parent, anything that we embody is going to have an effect. Now, that doesn't mean that, it's the end of the world. So I know from my upbringing, it wasn't ideal, but I've been able to do the work later in life. And whatever happened to me when I was younger has made me who I am today. So it's not to say that, it's the end of the world if one parent is not on board with this. So it can be difficult. It can have an effect on the child. But like we said earlier, there is a certain amount of compromise. I know that I'm not 100% right all the time. It's hard to admit it. But I know that. So I've learned to adapt as well. I've learned to compromise that actually sometimes for children to do things a bit out of their comfort zone, that's okay as well. They're going to learn from that as well. So, obviously, as much as you can, try and be on board, try and be on the same page, talk as much as you can about, what do we want for our children? Do we want them to have this idealized of life of it's all about money, career, it's all about sports, about attainment? Or do we want them to have a bit of balance? So we do want them to work towards worldly success, but we want them to have that love and respect inside of themselves and understand what life is about as well. Sorry, was there another part to that question that I didn't answer?
No, I think that's covered. It's okay. Yeah, it was about, I hope that answered your question. Aman, if you still have another question, you can still comment us on that if you are satisfied or not. And just while we hear from her, so Penji, also just talking about in terms of like, nanke, dadake, like nani, nana, nani, grandparents, what we say. So what's their role, you can say, in raising children, and, how do they come in picture in this?
Again, it completely depends on the circumstances. For me, it's like we alluded to earlier, is back in the day, we would have had this extended family. And we're really fortunate. So we've got Baba Bibi over the road, and it's like we live separately, but we almost live together as well. And they've been a huge contribution to the upbringing of the children. And we've talked about kind of compassion and love, and that's one thing that they've really been able to give. So even for myself, there is a certain level where I have to make sure they eat, I have to make sure they do their homework, I have to bring in a bit of discipline. But the grandparents have been a huge part of, just showing them that unconditional love. So where that is available, I think in this modern world, we get very much caught up in we want things our way, and we should try and open our minds up a little bit. So, I know my father-in-law gives my children lots of sweet things, and I'm not necessarily always happy about that. Yes. But when I took a step back and I thought about, what are the memories and what are the feelings that are coming up in my children when they're with their Baba, like nothing can beat that. So that's okay. Yes. So that just means that I will give them I will give them less sugary stuff at home, because I know that Baba's going to give them. In the same way, I know when they go over, they got kulli shutti, basically, they can watch as much TV as they want. They get to play devices. And now I used to have a problem with it, but now I'm like, again, that's okay. They get that there. They also get a love and affection there. So when they come home, I know that I'm just going to do a little bit less of that. So I won't necessarily let them do that at home. And I think it's really important that we demonstrate to our children that even if someone's not always doing things your way, you can find a happy compromise. There's always gun, there's always virtues in the grandparents that we as parents don't have, that the children relate to. So a really nice example of the way that I've understood this is I'm actually a Thai. So I've got a little nephew, my husband's brother's son. And I noticed the difference. I understood it from, even though I'm just a Thai, I'm not a nani or a bibi. So when he comes over, there's so much love for him. And I don't feel pressure at all to make sure that he eats. But when he comes, when we sit down to eat, he wants to eat because he wants to be part of the family, and it's just being showing him that love. But I don't feel the pressure that I feel with my own children, and that's how kind of the grandparents are. Is they don't have that almost burden that, oh, the child's got to be like this, they've got to do that. They're just giving them unconditional love, and I've experienced that with my nephew as well. It's just unconditional love. So I think it's a really important role. Obviously, not every family is the same, so you won't necessarily have dadke, nanke, the grandparents where they get that, but that's okay as well. It's not the end of the world if you don't have that for your children, and you can just keep working on it yourself. There's so many other ways. Again, we're so blessed to have sangat in Sikhi. Any bibi at the gurdwara, any baba at the gurdwara can become that child's grandparent. So one more thing that I think is really important about the grandparents is passing down the wisdom, of our culture. So obviously sometimes those things are not things that we like if it's coming from kind of more modern Punjabi culture, but there's lots of things that they can pass down. So a friend of mine has written a book which is about basically kahavatan, so Punjabi sayings, and there's a lot of wisdom in that. And then also we have all of the wisdom of Guru Granth Sahib Ji Maharaj. So telling sakhiya, telling stories to the children that we might not necessarily have time for, that's a really amazing role. Just speaking to the children in Punjabi is a huge thing that grandparents can do. And I totally understand, it's really difficult for grandparents to know where they stand right now as well in kind of this Western culture, because we're starting to merge the two. We got the Punjabi and the Western thing coming together. But, if you're a grandparent, your role is only to show that unconditional love. And that's more than enough, and just pass down whatever wisdom that you have.
Sorry, I'm back now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yes. Yes, Ranjeet, Benji had a technical glitch, so
Connection
she's
issue,
back.
yeah.
Benji, you have any comment on this one?
Yeah, so from what I can hear, I heard snippets about the grandparents. A question before we answer Ilvin's question, but with regards to the balance between self-care and caring for others. So like, for example, when I go to see my nanny and we give her food, or we, anything she needs, she just knows we're there, although she's a very independent lady. I don't know why, but during lockdown, every time I left nanny, I'd just break down. And I think it was more, it's really sad that I can't hug her, or I can't give her a foot massage because it's so swollen. She'd be very like, "Tu ja hon," like you can't come into the house, or just leave the food and then go. But I found it really difficult to have any type of balance between kind of understanding and caring at the same time. Like, so does that make sense to you? Like, how to have a balance between self-care and caring for others as well, especially grandparents?
Yeah. So I think it doesn't have to be either or. Like you can do both, and actually, in order to be able to care for others, you have to be able to care for yourself. So if you imagine that you're a banda, you're a vessel, and your vessel has to be full to overflowing in order for you to give it to other people. And sometimes, especially as women, as daughters, as mothers, we have so many roles, and we're always trying to give to other people. And that's something that I experienced. I was doing that, but I wasn't filling up my own vessel. I wasn't doing anything for myself. So it got to the point where my health got so bad that I couldn't actually do anything for anyone else. So the first thing is to look after yourself. And, nowadays self-care means so many different things to different people. But for me, self-care was, that reflection, that Kaur of what's going on within me. The Kaur of Gurbani, what's my understanding of what Guru's saying to me that's important in life. Meditation, Namabhyas, and sometimes it does mean I'm going to have a nice bath with Epsom salts and lavender oil, or I'm going to go for a walk. But for me, that is my prescription. So what Guru's given me and anything else that I need, that's my prescription. If I don't take my prescription every day, I'm going to be ill. And if I'm ill, I can't look after anybody else. So that fills me up. That fills up my banda. And from that overflow, I can then give to my children. I can give to, my parents. I can give to all the people around me. The thing with lockdown is for me, it's almost a lesson that Guru's giving us, that we have to adapt. We have to be, I think the word was chalda vahir, like, back in the day, Sikhs we were always adapting, we were always changing to the situation. And for us, Guru tells us, hukam rajai chalana. So we have to accept hukam. So, but that doesn't mean that we have to back away from the people who need us. We can find other ways of doing it. So if we're calling somebody, more often, we can still do it, but we have to accept these other circumstances. And that's huge. So if you can accept that, first of all, it will make it easier to then step away from that person. And when we step away from that person, it also makes it easier for us to give to that person, because we don't have any expectation of them. So for me, at the beginning of lockdown, I was struggling myself a little bit, if I'm completely honest. So I did step away. And then I started to take care of myself. I started to take care of my children a bit better in my family. And then I was able to go a bit out further, and I was able to, make more phone calls. And then when we were allowed to, I was able to go visit my parents and give to them as well. The other thing is, we can't underestimate what effect that how we're reacting is having on the other person. So Ranjeet, you were saying, you feel bad when you leave your Naniji, but your Naniji is going to pick up on that actually, she's feeling bad as she's leaving, and she's going to feel bad about the fact that you feel bad, right? So if you're leaving in Chardhi Kala, like, you're going to be fine. I'm on the other end of the phone. If you need anything, just connect to Guru.
Oh, she
If you're
has no
leaving,
idea. She has absolutely no idea. It's in the car when I
yeah,
lock the door and I've driven away. That's when I'm like, oh my God, that just hit me home. Like that just hit me
oh my
hard
goodness.
as well. But when I'm
But
with
you'd be,
her,
yeah.
it's very
Yeah,
face.
you'd still be surprised, Benji, because not everything happens on a verbal level. Everything is energy. Vaheguru is energy. Vaheguru is everything, right? So people do pick up on these things. So I think it's really important that we do our own reflection. Everything comes from us. So when we're able to accept this situation, our ancestors had much, much harder things to deal with when it came to family, the sacrifices that were given. So these are relatively small, and we have to get the perspective of that, and we have to accept this is hukam. And what do we learn from this, and how do we connect to ourselves first and fill up our banda, and then we can give out.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much. So just before we asked you some of the questions from the Sangha. Which book were you referring to when you said that?
Oh, Hanji, sorry, yeah, I forgot to mention it. So it's by Kuljit Kaur, and it's called 52 Nuggets of Wisdom.
I've heard of this book, yes.
Yeah, so I think it's being released on the 1st of September, but you can pre-order on, I think it's Carlis House, their website. But for me, that's amazing, because there's so much wisdom that we can pass on, that we can reflect on. And one amazing way for our children to prosper, Guru tells us, is, I might get it wrong, but Baba, I can't say it, Baba, I can't say, Babahaniya, Kahaniya, Put Saput Karenge. So apologies. Yeah, sorry. Apologies if I didn't.
Yeah, that's okay.
It.
Yeah.
So basically, the stories of our ancestors turn just normal children into super children, turn them into amazing children. So being able to talk about our history, or talk about our past, just in stories, we don't have to enforce for them to sit down. You have to meditate. You have to do Gurbani. If you can do that and they're willing, that's amazing. Keep doing it. But if you're struggling with that, stories are so powerful. Even to me, Guru Sakhi Jot Pargat Hoye, I take that literally. Literally talking about my Guru is going to make that Jot Pargat. It's going to make me shine, and it's going to make my children shine. So, investing in things like that, looking into our culture, into our dharam, all of that stuff, just talking about it, talk as much as possible, it's going to have a huge effect.
We've got some comments to go through. We've got Ilveen Kaur. So she's put, but wouldn't that affect the children's behavior, and they'll think others are better than parents if they're getting more of what they want? I'm not sure which question that was in
I think
relation to.
this was in regard to the previous conversation we were having around grandparents. I think it was at that time. So not sure of the context. Yes, if you can get.
So it's a little bit about what I said earlier, is things, as long as the affection and the attention is there, the quality time is there, the communication is there. We have this word vigarajoga, or when children get spoiled. So again, it's the things that spoil them. So when my children, for example, go to their grandparents, that's a limited time. Like, you have to set your boundaries that, they'll go every Saturday, for example, and they'll sleep the night there. So they have that. But then during the week, they have normality at home. So it's not that they're there all the time and they're doing whatever they want all the time. They know that when they go to Baba and Bibi's house, they get it there. But we still set boundaries at home. But we set them with love. And it's not about strictness and discipline. It's about, okay, what do you need in order to prosper? And yes, you need to be able to do your homework. You need to eat certain, nutritious food. But let's work on that together, and let's do it with love. One other thing I just really quickly want to say is the next generation and our generation is more about the why, not just the do. So maybe when we grew up, and certainly when our parents grew up, it was karidaya, like megeta karna pena. And the next generation don't work like that. So the more you invest in talking about why we do it, why we eat healthy, why we don't want to spend too much time on TV, and just explaining to them, trust me, they will get it. And they'll start to, as they get older, they'll start to implement it as well.
Yeah. Now that's well said. And Ilveen, I hope that would have answered your question. And with my case as well, I have a personal experience. Like my father, so means my daughter's grandfather, he will always, give barfi to my daughter, even though I always tell him, don't give it, it's very sugary. He will still give it. So that's where I have to play, because, that's an old age and we need to keep a balance. We have to take care of grandparents and we have to take care of the kids. That's such an age that where you are in between and you have to balance. So it's all about, balancing everything.
And there's nothing wrong.
Yes, there's nothing
wrong with speaking to them. Like if there is something that's really bothering you,
yes,
you can speak the truth, but you can do it with love. So, there have been times where there's something that I don't like, and I've just gone to them and I've said to them with love, could you not do this, or could you do that? So there's nothing wrong with saying that, but it's got to be with love.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Love is the key.
Right.
Yeah. So we have two more questions before we finish off for today. So we've got another question which is regarding broken relationships. And Jasleen is mentioning that it hugely impacts on children and which also affect them on the way they socialize. Would you say something about this?
Sorry, could you just rephrase the question?
Yep. So it's broken relationships hugely impact on children, which also affect the way they socialize.
Yeah. So, obviously it will have an effect, but then there's plenty of relationships where people have stayed together and actually it's not working. So that has just as bad an impact as, where there is a broken relationship. I'm not sure I get the socialized question, but at the end of the day, you can only do what you can do. So you've got to accept the situation, what it is. If we stay in a place of fear that, oh no, what is this going to do to my child? How is it going to affect them? And, maybe when they grow up, they're going to end up in a similar relationship. If we're in that fear, that's what will happen, because when we operate from a place of fear, then we're not in a place of love. We can't be in the two places at the same time. But just because there's a broken relationship doesn't mean that they can't have an amazing childhood. So that's up to you, is how much are you going to invest in yourself, doing that reflection of yourself, and how can I make this an amazing childhood? So I have a friend who, she got divorced, but she put so much time and effort into quality time with her child, really helping her child to understand what had happened. It's not necessarily about things, but she made sure that he didn't miss out on any opportunities that other children were getting. She made sure that he had everything he needed as much as to her ability. So you don't need to feel guilty if you can't provide the same things. But it keeps coming back to the same principles, which is love and connection and communication. So talk about what's happened, talk about it in a compassionate way. So it's not about this person was to blame or that person was to blame. It just didn't work, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be any less better off, because anything you need, you come to me and you ask me and I can do my best to provide it. It's definitely more difficult, but as soon as we accept it's going to be more difficult, we can do something about it. And again, reach out to community. So if you have extended family, if you can find sangat, if you can create sangat, if you need help kind of understanding what's happened, we mentioned at the beginning that we're working with Seek Your Mind, reach out if you need extra help, if you need a counselor, psychotherapist, you need someone to talk to, even a friend, about your situation. And I think that's one thing that we're really not good at doing, is asking for help. So you can always ask for help. Don't be too proud, because that's just our ego. And there's so many people out there. We mentioned at the beginning as well about seva. There's so many people who are waiting and willing to do that seva. So don't feel like you're alone either.
Thanks, Benji, for that. Our last question is from Gurinder Kaur. She's asking, what's the best way to deal with siblings teasing each other a lot during lockdown?
Yeah, so that's a tricky one, because there's so much time. It's like a pressure cooker. First thing is, siblings are going to fight. They're going to argue. It's completely normal within reason. So there's going to be a little bit of that, and it doesn't mean anything. If it's going on a lot, there are some things we can do. So one thing, when we were running the mindful parenting courses, it had a huge impact, and I had a lot of feedback saying this has changed the way that the siblings relate to each other, and also our relationship, and that's quality time. So literally, if you've got 2 children, if you can, just sit down for 15 minutes with one child. Let the other child be busy with something else, let someone else take them away. Even if you need to put the other child in front of the TV for 15 minutes, that's okay. Just spend 15 minutes with that child, or half an hour if you've got that. And then do that, the same thing with the other child, because a lot of the time that rivalry is just that need for attention. And once they get that attention from you as the parent, they stop bickering so much. So I've had a lot of people come back and say, actually, just putting in that quality time, whether it's every day or every other day, it actually made the other children get on with each other better.
Well, thank you so much for that, Benji. My kids are always arguing.
Yeah.
And I think it's because the same age. Yeah. And but yeah, we keep them busy separately if we can, and together as well. Benji, so with regards to Seek Your Mind and core coaching, how is it that the audience can get in touch with your services, like social media, or your handle, your website, your courses, etc.?
Yeah, so for Seek Your Mind, they're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So at Seek Your Mind. They also have a website. And if you do need any support, you can email them, and it's info@seekyourmind.co.uk, I think. I'm not sure about the last bit. And for myself, it's core coaching. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Right now, because the children are home, so there's not a lot of courses running, I'm doing more one-to-one coaching. But if you subscribe, then anything that comes up, you can find it on there, or on Instagram or Facebook. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Benji. I had so many more questions about anxiety and parenting, and this topic could go on for a few more sessions. But it's been really good. We'd like to thank Amandeep Kaur today for your time and knowledge. We've surely learnt so much, and we hope our viewers have learnt as well. We have had some positive feedback. Surinder Auntie's on the comment has mentioned, where grandparents are involved, I see kids are more confident, loving, and show care. So that's lovely to hear from a grandparent as well. And so this topic, mindful parenting, has been really good. Thank you so much, Benji. And Sangatji, if you are worried about your parenting skills, or you need someone to talk to, like Benji was saying regarding this topic, then please reach out to Seek Your Mind via social media. And we hope to see you next week. And if you have any comments or a specific topic that you would like covered, then please send us an email to hello@thekaurshow.com. And if you want to see our previous shows, then please visit our website, thekaurshow.com. Sorry, Benji, did you want to add anything else onto this?
Yeah,
No, I think that was, very, very insightful. Yes, Benji, please go further. Yes.
Sorry, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity, and I'm sorry if I said anything wrong.
Oh, no. I know.
No, it was absolutely very insightful. We learned a lot. And I sometimes wonder, before we become even parents, we need to have all these conversations, which we don't usually have. We haven't, spread that kind of culture, but we need to have these kind of talks, which are really meant for our life and for children and for future as well. So it's very important. We had Yes, so yes, Sangatji, I think you would have learned a lot today. It's regarding Gurmat way of raising your children. It's the language of love, compassion. I think that's going to help. So please keep, watering these values in your life and become better parents. So thank you so much, Penji, and we will be uploading this show on our website, kaurshow.com. And for our previous episodes as well, you can refer to the website. And we look forward meeting you next week. So thank you so much, Penji, Ranjeet Kaur, Penji, Amandeep Kaur, and all the viewers who were watching this session today. Thank you. Have a great day. Good night. Thanks. Bye. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ,
Khalsa,
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ
Waheguru Ji
ਫਤਿਹ
Ki
ਜੀ।
Fateh.